Good evening. My name is Jeffrey Horner. Um, I am a volunteer here at OneShul doing Torah portions. I am not a Torah scholar. My day job is fundraising for a charity. I am Gabbai of my congregation, so I get to read the Torah portions every week for bar mitzvahs. And I thought I would share things that I look at when I look at Torah portions, because part of what I need to do is give a speech to the bar mitzvah person, boy or girl, during the course of the bar mitzvah, and I need to know what the Torah portion is. So I've gotten to read the Torah portions over the years, and I've always had a lot of questions, and I've asked my rabbi, who I consider a very intelligent man, different questions about the Torah. And he has said to me, the Torah is truth, but it's not always true, because it is metaphor, and in metaphor there are a lot of things that are truth that you take the truth out of it, but that doesn't necessarily mean they are true on the surface. Exodus is the second book of the 5 books. The first book is Genesis, and for example, in Genesis it starts out with Bereshit, which means in the beginning. But what if it started out once upon a time? Because what we're talking about in Genesis is once upon a time, because no one really knows what happened back then. Would we care so much about it? In Exodus, we are now talking about Moses and how Moses led the children of Israel out of bondage and to the Torah. So let's start with Shemot. The first chapter talks about the names of all the people that came to Egypt with Jacob, the sons of Jacob. Okay, so it gives names and names, and then the sons of Joseph. So it gives names and names. The total number of persons of Jacob's issue came to 70. Joseph died, and all his brethren, all that generation. But when you go to Exodus 1:7, but the Israelites were fertile and prolific. They multiplied and increased very greatly, so that the land was filled with them. The Torah was oral tradition for, 1,000 years before it was written down. So therefore, they had to use the same words over and over so people would remember one thing from another. Because it is in Genesis that they talk about be fertile and prolific, multiply and increase, so the land was filled with them. He does it with, God talks about that in the making of the world with animals and with all these other things. So this is the kind of thing where they restate it so that you know that this comes after the other book, so that they are tied together. Next in Shemot, it talks about a new king arose who did not know Joseph. Okay, and this is the Pharaoh, and the Pharaoh sets the taskmasters on to oppressing the people and building the storehouses of Pithom and Ramses. The Egyptians impose various labors, and they make them perform. And then we go to 1:15, where the king of Egypt, and it does not say Pharaoh at this point, it's the king of Egypt, spoke to the Hebrew midwives, Shiphrah and Puah, saying, when you deliver the Hebrew women, look at the birth stool. If it is a boy, kill him. If it is a girl, let her live. The midwives, fearing God, do not do as the king of Egypt told them. It says fearing God, but let's talk about midwives for a second. These people historically bring new life into the world. They share this new life with the mother. They are part of the bringing of life. I don't see how someone who can bring many lives into the world, as midwives did all the time, could then turn around and become someone that brings death. It might have been fearing God. It might have been the fact that they just couldn't bring themselves to kill a child after bringing it into the world. So they let the boys live. The king of Egypt summoned the midwives and said to them, "Why have you done this?" The midwives said to Pharaoh, now we're back to Pharaoh versus king, "Because the Hebrew women are not like the Egyptian women, they are vigorous. Before the midwife can come to them, they've given birth." And so the people, the Jews, increased even though they were now slaves in Egypt. That brings us to chapter 2, which is the birth of Moses. It's very interesting. There's so much written on Moses, and I've had a chance to look up a lot of things about Moses. One of the great things, I looked at Chabad, and Chabad is a wonderful source, although sometimes it's laughable. One of the things Chabad said, this is printed from Chabad.org. It says, Moses was born in Egypt on the 7th of Adar in the year 1393 BCE, at a time when the Israelites were slaves to the ruler of the land. How did they know that? This is such conjecture on the part of all these people, whether it's the Talmud, whether it's Rashi. This is such conjecture because the actual biblical verses leave so much to be filled in, and everybody fills it in. Everybody talks about it. They say, oh, he did this, he did that, but it's not what it says in the text. They are making it up. They are filling it in. Okay? The woman conceived, bore a son. When she saw how beautiful he was, she hid him for 3 months. When she could hide him no longer, she put him in the basket. And the daughter of Pharaoh came down to bathe in the Nile. She spied the basket. When she opened it, she saw it was a child. She took pity and said, "This must be a Hebrew child." Miriam comes out, says, "Hey, would you like to keep it? Do you need a nursemaid for it?" Yes, yes. And then it says, she named him Moses, explaining, "I drew him out of the water." She's an Egyptian princess. Do you think she speaks Hebrew? I somehow doubt it. I don't think the hierarchy in Egypt spoke the slaves' language. I think they spoke Egyptian, or whatever it is that Egyptians spoke. I know they did not speak hieroglyphics since it's a written language. So the woman took the child and nursed it, and then when the child grew up, she brought him to Pharaoh's daughter. So Pharaoh's daughter finds this baby, gives it back to his mother, and they don't use the name of his mother in here, although the names of his mother and father are taken throughout, but it's not actually in the text. And so she now raises Moses in the palace. Then we go to verse 11. Sometime after that, when Moses had grown up, was Moses 20? Was Moses 30? Was Moses 40? It's interesting that in the Bible where they talk about years all the time, where he was X amount of years and this amount of years, there's no years in this. And the first thing they talk about in this break, after he's been taken out of the water, now he's grown up, is that he sees an Egyptian beating a Hebrew, one of his kinsmen. He's been grown up in the palace, and yet he already knows that the Hebrew that the Egyptian is beating is one of his kinsmen. What gives that away? Is it the fact that the Egyptian is dressed a certain way and the Hebrew is dressed a certain way? Again, the text doesn't talk about it. It is the commentary that talks about all this, whether it's all these people. Lots of people talk about it. So he kills the Egyptian and buries the guy in the sand. And then he goes out the next day, he finds two Hebrews fighting. So he says to them, why do you strike your fellow? And the Hebrew retorts, who made you chief and ruler over us? Do you mean to kill me as you killed the Egyptian? So somehow, in the next day, everybody knows that he killed the Egyptian. When Pharaoh learned of the matter, he sought to kill Moses, but Moses fled from Pharaoh. He arrived in the land of Midian and sat down beside a well. Okay. So Moses has now left Egypt. He's now in Midian. He's wondering, what am I going to do next? The priest of Midian had 7 daughters. They came to draw water and filled the troughs to water their father's flock, but shepherds came and drove them off. Moses rose to their defense and watered their flock. When they returned to their father Reuel, he said, how is it that you have come back so soon today? They answered, an Egyptian rescued us from the shepherds. He even drew water from us and watered the flock. He said to his daughters, where is he then? Why did you leave the man? Ask him to break bread. Reuel, I don't know where the Reuel comes from, because in all the commentary, again, they talk about Jethro. Jethro consented to stay with the man, and he gave Moses his daughter Zipporah for a wife. So Moses marries a woman who is not Jewish. I say that, but Moses at that point, well, was Jewish, because it's an odd thing. God had not yet given the Torah to the Jews. That comes later in Exodus. So how were the Jews Jewish if they didn't yet have the Torah? I don't know the answer to that. Excuse me one second. Moses marries a non-Jew. This to me is a big deal, because throughout history, it's always been, you must marry a Jew, you must marry a Jew to keep the Judaism strong. And yet Moses, our greatest teacher, does not follow that same idea. And yet, in all of these commentaries that I read, it's not really discussed. It's like they gloss over. It's like, no, we're not going to talk about that. Interesting. Very interesting to me. So Moses gets Zipporah as a wife. She bears him a son who's named Gershom, for he said, I have been a stranger in a foreign land. This whole first passage is called Shemot, names. And yet Gershom, the son of Moses, his entire line is not followed. There are lots of people in lines and begats and begats and begats in the Torah of who did what. The line of Esau in Genesis is followed 3 or 4 generations. Why is it that the son of the greatest rabbi supposedly in the history of Judaism is not followed? I don't understand that. Now there's an interlude. 23. A long time after that, the king of Egypt died. The Israelites were groaning under the bondage and cried out, and their cry for help from the bondage rose up to God. God heard their moaning, and God remembered his covenant with Abraham and Isaac and Jacob. God looked upon the Israelites, and God took notice of them. So we've stopped the story of Moses. We've gone back to the Israelites. Just for that 3 or 4 lines. Then we go to chapter 3. Moses, tending the flock of his father-in-law Jethro, the priest of Midian, drove the flock into the wilderness and came to Horeb, the mountain of God. An angel of the Lord appeared to him in a blazing fire out of a bush. He gazed. There was a bush aflame, yet the bush was not consumed. Moses said, I must turn aside to look at this marvelous sight. Why doesn't the bush burn up? When the Lord saw that he had turned aside to look, God called to him out of the bush, Moses, Moses. And Moses answered, Here I am. Same thing Abraham answered, the same thing Joseph answered, the same thing Jacob answered. God says, remove your shoes. Why do you remove your shoes? There's a couple of reasons, I think. One of them is the fact that he's a goat herder and his shoes are probably full of goat dung. Another reason is simpler in that when you remove your shoes, you now have to feel the ground with your feet, feel everything with your feet. You have to walk a little more gingerly. You don't want to step on anything hard. With shoes, you can step on glass, you can step on rocks, you can do things, you can climb. But when you are in bare feet, you have to step more gingerly and be more careful in how you step. So God wants him to step carefully when he is approaching God. Now, again, this says God. Abraham met angels. Isaac met angels. Jacob and Joseph both met angels. Jacob wrestled an angel of God, not God. It is Moses who meets God, supposedly. And Moses hid his face because he was afraid to look at God. He said, I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. The Lord continued, I have marked well the plight of my people in Egypt and have heeded their outcry because of their taskmasters. Yes, I am mindful of their suffering. I have come down to rescue them from the Egyptians and to bring them out of the land that is a good and spacious land, a land flowing with milk and honey. Okay, come therefore, I will send you to Pharaoh, and you shall free my people, the Israelites, from Egypt. And this starts a very interesting conversation. Moses is talking to God, and Moses doesn't want to do this. Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and free the Israelites from Egypt? God says, I will be with you. That shall be your sign that it was I who sent you. And when you have freed the people from Egypt, you shall worship God at this mountain. Moses says again, when I come to the Israelites and say to them, the God of your fathers has sent me to you, they say, what is his name? When Abraham talks to the angel, he doesn't ask what his name is. When Jacob wrestles with the angel, he does. He wants to find him out. He wants to find out. God said to Moses, Ea asher Ea. You shall say to the Israelites, Ea sent me to you. And God said further to Moses, thus shall you speak to the Israelites, the Lord, the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, has sent me to you. This shall be my name forever. Go and assemble the elders of Israel and say to them, the Lord, the God of your fathers, has appeared to me and said, I have taken note of you and what is being done to you in Egypt. And I have declared I will take you out of the misery of Egypt to the land of the Canaanites, the Hittites, and the land flowing with milk and honey. They will listen to you. Well, you know, if someone was standing in a burning, if I heard voices out of a burning bush and they said they will listen to you, I would just believe them. I just would be overwhelmed with awe over what I was actually participating in. We are a very sophisticated people, so to speak, versus Moses living, 1393 BCE. So when this voice is talking to him, it is very impressive that he actually is thinking enough to ask these questions versus just suddenly prostrating himself on the ground and saying, anything you want. Moses says, chapter 4, Moses spoke up and said, what if they do not believe me and do not listen to me, but said the Lord did not appear to you? The Lord said to him, what is that in your hand? He replied, a rod. Cast it to the ground. He cast it to the ground and it became a snake, and Moses recoiled from it. Then the Lord said to Moses, put out your hand and grasp it by the tail. Again, snake, Genesis, Garden of Eden, bringing back the ideas that the storytellers had been telling with Genesis. There's a very special, oh boy, quotation about the staff. Let me find it. I thought I had it here quickly, and I do not. Hold 1 second. Oh, come on. The staff. This is Midrash. Created at twilight before the Sabbath, it was given to Adam in the Garden of Eden. Adam gave it to Enoch, who gave it to Methuselah. He in turn passed it on to Noah. Noah bequeathed it to his son Shem, who transmitted it to Abraham. From Abraham to Isaac, and then to Jacob, who took it with him to Egypt. Jacob gave it to Joseph. Upon Joseph's death, all his possessions were removed to Pharaoh's place. Jethro, one of Pharaoh's advisors, desired it, whereupon he took it and stuck it in the ground in his garden in Midian. From then on, no one could pull out the staff until Moses came. He read the Hebrew on the staff and pulled it out readily. Knowing that Moses was the Redeemer of Israel, Jethro gave him his daughter Zipporah in marriage. That's the Midrash. When you read about the staff, it goes on up to and including the staff was passed on and on until it got to Jesus, it got to Muhammad. That staff is important. In the Jesus story, it even goes as far as to say that it was used as part of the cross that he was crucified on. But it just shows the power of these ideas, the rod that turns into a snake that is special, that Moses had. So this gives Moses a power that no one else has. So the Lord said to him further, put your hand into your bosom. He put his hand into his bosom, and when he took it out, his hand was encrusted with snowy scales. And he said, put your hand back in your bosom. He put his hand back into his bosom, and when he took it out of his bosom, there was again like the rest of his body. And if they do not believe you or pay heed in the first sign, they will believe the second. And if they are not convinced by both these signs, and still do not heed you, take some water from the Nile and pour it on dry ground, and if the water that you take from the Nile will turn to blood on the dry ground. So God is actually telling Moses what he's going to do. And what happens? Moses says to him again, please, Lord, I have never been a man of words, either in times past, now that you have spoken with your servant. I am slow of speech and slow of tongue. I got to believe by this time, the Lord is just a little crazed, maybe a little angry. The Lord said to him, who gives man speech? Who makes him dumb or deaf, seeing or blind? Is it not I, the Lord? Now go, and I will be with you as you speak, and will instruct you what to say. And again Moses says, please, O Lord, make someone else your agent. The Lord is angry with Moses, and he says, there is your brother Aaron the Levite. He, I know, speaks readily. Even now he is setting out to meet you, and he will be happy to see you. You shall speak to him and put the words in his mouth. I will be with you and with him as you speak. Tell both of you what to do. And he shall speak for you to the people, meaning the Israelites. Then he shall serve as your spokesman, with you playing the role of God to him. Playing the role of God to him. Moses doesn't want to be God. Moses doesn't even want to be there. And yet, God is telling him that he has to act like a God to Aaron. take with you this rod, the rod that we just talked about, which you shall perform the signs. Moses goes back to Jethro. Jethro says to Moses, go in peace. The Lord said to Moses, go back to Egypt, for all the men who sought to kill you are dead. So Moses took his wife and sons, went back to Egypt, and Moses took the rod of God with him. The Lord said to, we're at 21. The Lord said to Moses, when you return to Egypt, see that you perform before Pharaoh all the marvels that I have put within your power. I, however, will stiffen his heart so that he will not let this people go. Then you shall say to Pharaoh, thus says the Lord, Israel is my firstborn son. I have said to you, let my son go, that he may worship me, yet you refuse to let him go. Now I will slay your firstborn son. Israel is his firstborn son, not Moses. Israel is the name of Jacob. Jacob's bones are buried in Egypt. So one of the things Moses has to do is get Jacob's bones. Another interlude, 24. At a night encampment on the way, the Lord encountered him and sought to kill him. So Zipporah took a flint and cut off her son's foreskin and touched his legs with it, saying, you are truly a bridegroom of blood to me. And when he let him alone, she added, a bridegroom of blood because of the circumcision. Moses' son wasn't circumcised. Was he not Jewish? We know that Judaism historically comes through the mother. So Zipporah wasn't Jewish. So therefore the son wasn't Jewish. So Zipporah, knowing that the way to stop the hurting of Moses was to circumcise her son, did that make Gershon Jewish just by the circumcision? Again, it does not say. It talks about a bridegroom of blood because she put the blood on Moses, which again begs the question, was Moses circumcised? As a growing up in the palace in Egypt, that's not necessarily true. He might not have been circumcised. The Lord said to Aaron, go meet Moses in the wilderness. He went and met him at the mountain of God and kissed him. Moses told Aaron all the things that the Lord had committed to him and all the signs of which he instructed him. Then Moses and Aaron went and assembled all the elders of the Israelites. Part of the question here, and this is what we read in the Haggadah and all this stuff, how long were the Israelites slaves? According to Exodus, it's, what is it? Hold on. 1240. Chapter 12, verse 40, they were they were slaves for 430 years. So how did they still have elders? Okay, or was this the elders of the tribes? Did they keep the tribes together? How did this work? Elders is not discussed of who the elders were. Aaron repeated all the words the Lord had spoken to Moses, and he performed the signs in the sight of the people, and the people were convinced. When they heard that the Lord had taken note of the Israelites, they had seen their plight, they bowed low in homage. Chapter 5. Afterward, Moses and Aaron went and said to Pharaoh, thus says the Lord, the God of Israel, let my people go that they may celebrate a festival for me in the wilderness. There are two questions here. How did Moses and Aaron get to Pharaoh? How did they walk in the palace and say, okay, we're going to see Pharaoh now, we have an appointment? How did they do this? How did they get to Pharaoh? It's so interesting because they just occurred. Moses and Aaron went and said to Pharaoh. The other part of this is is this. Pharaoh is raised to be a god in the flesh. This is what Pharaoh is. As a god in the flesh, and as an Egyptian, which was a very civilized, quote, society at that time, they knew of other gods. They knew about the Phoenicians. They knew about the Greeks. They knew about other gods throughout. So they understood that there were other gods. This was just another god among these gods. Pharaoh himself thought of himself as a god. So he's looking at these two guys and going, you have a god. That's good. That's really nice. Why should I let all my slaves go because you're telling me that you're God? I am a god. You are just messengers from a god. And he says, Pharaoh said, who is the Lord that I should heed him and let Israel go? I do not know the Lord, nor will I let Israel go. They answered, the God of the Hebrews has manifested himself to us. Let us go, we pray, a distance of 3 days into the wilderness to sacrifice to the Lord our God, lest he strike us with pestilence or sword. But the king of Egypt said to them, Moses and Aaron, why do you distract the people from their tasks? Get to your labors. And Pharaoh continued, the people of the land are already so numerous, and you would have them cease from their labors. So he's not buying this God stuff. Not only is he not buying it, he now says to the taskmasters and foremen of the people, no longer provide the people with straw for making bricks. Let them go gather straw for themselves, but keep the same quotas. So now he's going to impose stricter and harsher punishment for Moses and Aaron doing what they did. So therefore, what's going on is that now he is making the people work harder because of what Moses and Aaron said. And the people now are upset. The taskmasters and foremen of the people went out and said to the people, thus says Pharaoh, I will not give you any straw. The people scattered throughout the land to gather stubble for straw. The taskmasters pressed them, saying, you must complete the same work assignment every day as when you had straw. And the foreman of the Israelites said, why did you not complete the prescribed amount of bricks either yesterday or today as you did before? The foreman of the Israelites came to Pharaoh and cried, why did you deal thus with your servants? No straw is issued to your servants, yet they demand of us, make bricks. Thus your servants are being beaten when the fault is with your own people. He replied, you are shirkers. Let us go and sacrifice to the Lord. Be off now and do your work. Now the foremen of the Israelites found themselves in trouble because of this order. You must not reduce your daily quantity of bricks. As they left Pharaoh's presence, they came upon Moses and Aaron standing in their path, and they said to them, may the Lord look upon you and punish you for making us loathsome to Pharaoh and his courtiers, putting a sword in their hands to slay us. So they're also not happy with what's going on, and they're kind of taking Pharaoh's side because they don't see the way out, because Pharaoh's making them work harder now that Moses and Aaron have talked to them. Why did you send me? Ever since I came to Pharaoh to speak in your name, he's dealt worth with these people. The Lord said, the end, chapter 6, which is the end of this portion, says, the Lord said to Moses, you shall soon see what I will do to Pharaoh. He shall let them go because of greater might. Indeed, because of a greater might, he shall drive them from the land. So God is setting up a confrontation with Pharaoh. This is odd. Why would God want to confront Pharaoh if God is such a bigger entity than Pharaoh? Is it because Pharaoh thinks he's a god and God is going to show him who's boss here? I don't really know. Okay, but in the next portion, we talk about the first of the plagues and what Moses and Aaron do. I will be doing that next Wednesday. I hope you will join me. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed it.